The Carolina sun painted golden streaks across the sidewalk as Celeste Monroe made her way home from the public library. At 8 months pregnant, every step was deliberate, careful. Her hand rested protectively on her rounded belly while the other clutched a small bag of oranges, a surprise for her husband Gavin's favorite dinner. The afternoon felt perfect, peaceful, the kind of day that makes you believe the world is fundamentally kind. Celeste had planned to surprise Gavin with chicken and dumplings when he returned from his veteran counseling center. She could already picture his tired but grateful smile as she set the steaming bowl before him. These small moments of domestic bliss had become precious as they prepared to welcome their first child. But as she turned the corner of 4th and Walnut, the sound of a police cruiser's engine shattered the tranquility. The vehicle slowed, then stopped abruptly beside her with a screech of tires. Officer Rick Donnelly emerged from the driver's side, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose reputation preceded him in whispered conversations throughout the community. His pale complexion contrasted sharply with his pressed uniform as he approached Celeste with predatory intent. "Stop right there," he barked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. Celeste froze, confusion clouding her features. "I'm just walking home," she replied softly, instinctively avoiding direct eye contact, a survival tactic learned through generations of navigating such encounters. "You look like you're loitering." "That's suspicious," Donnelly snapped, his hand hovering menacingly near his holster. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Celeste, heavily pregnant and clearly posed no threat, felt her baby flutter inside her womb as if sensing the danger. "Sir, I'm not loitering. I'm just trying to get home," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please." But that single word, "please," seemed to ignite something vicious in Donnelly. Without warning, he shoved her hard. Celeste stumbled backward, her feet catching on the uneven sidewalk. The oranges scattered across the concrete as she fell, her hands instinctively protecting her unborn child. Then came the unthinkable. With deliberate cruelty, Donnelly kicked her directly in the stomach. Celeste's scream pierced the afternoon, air a sound of agony, disbelief, and primal fear for her child's life. She collapsed, curled around her belly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered desperate prayers. Bystanders watched in horror. Someone shouted to call 911. Phones captured every brutal second, but no one intervened. The badge, it seemed, still carried enough weight to paralyze witnesses into inaction. As the ambulance arrived to carry away a broken woman, Officer Donnelly simply returned to his cruiser as if nothing had happened. But the cameras had been rolling, and the world was watching. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh against Gavin Monroe's eyes as he raced through the corridors. The phone call had shattered his world in an instant. "Your wife is in critical condition. She's asking for you." When he reached room 403, the sight of Celeste, bruised, broken, but alive, nearly brought him to his knees. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking both her heartbeat and their unborn child's. "Baby," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Celeste turned toward him slowly, her swollen eyes finding his. "I'm okay," she said, though they both knew she wasn't. "But he kicked me, Gavin. He kicked me." Those 5 words ignited something deep within Gavin Monroe. This wasn't just an assault on his wife. It was an attack on their future, their unborn child, their very humanity. The doctor's report confirmed Celeste had suffered blunt force trauma. The baby's heartbeat remained steady, but they were monitoring for complications. As medical professionals spoke in clinical terms about placental abruption and oxygen deprivation, Gavin felt a cold fury settling in his chest. That evening, as Celeste slept fitfully, Gavin stood at the hospital window watching candles appear on the steps below. First 5, then 50, then hundreds. The community was awakening to what had happened on their streets. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Marcus Price, an attorney and fellow veteran he hadn't spoken to in years. "Need your help. Civil rights case. No one's going to sweep this under the rug." The response came immediately. "I'm in. What happened?" Gavin typed back one devastating sentence. A cop kicked my pregnant wife in the stomach and the whole damn world saw it. The video had gone viral overnight. 40 seconds of brutal clarity that couldn't be denied, dismissed, or explained away. By morning, the footage had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms, igniting outrage that transcended racial and geographic boundaries. When Gavin emerged from the hospital to address the growing crowd, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had found his purpose. Someone handed him a microphone, and for the first time in days, he spoke with his full voice. "My name is Gavin Monroe," he began, his words carrying across the silent gathering. "The woman you saw on that pavement, the one who got kicked in the stomach for walking while pregnant, that's my wife." The crowd hung on every word as he continued. "Her name is Celeste, and that baby you saw her protect with her own body is our child. We've been planning for that life, reading baby books, arguing over names. I watched her decorate a nursery, with her bare hands and a swollen belly. And yesterday a man with a badge tried to take all that away." His voice grew stronger. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're not asking for revenge. We're asking for what anyone would want. What's right, what's decent, what's just." The applause that followed wasn't just approval, it was a declaration. This wouldn't be swept aside or forgotten. Within hours, news vans arrived from Charlotte, then DC, then national networks. The police department's response was as predictable as it was inadequate. Officer Donnelly had been placed on administrative leave pending review. Administrative leave. With pay. While Celeste lay in a hospital bed, unable to move without pain. What began as one case quickly revealed itself as part of a much larger pattern. Rosa Fields, the sharp-eyed civil rights attorney now working alongside Marcus, had begun pulling threads that unraveled years of covered-up misconduct. The folder they compiled on Officer Donnelly told a damning story. 3 prior excessive force complaints, 2 involving black women, all dismissed without proper investigation. Internal memos showed supervisors had raised red flags about his behavior. Training evaluations described him as aggressive and not suited for field work. Every warning sign had been ignored. But the investigation went deeper. Anonymous statements from current officers revealed a culture of silence and complicity. They spoke of complaints being rewritten or buried, of witnesses being discouraged from coming forward, of a system designed to protect its own at any cost. "This isn't just about one bad officer," Rosa announced at a packed press conference. "This is a network of negligence, a culture of protection for those who abuse power, and a pattern of silence from those sworn to uphold justice." The media coverage intensified. National civil rights organizations offered support. The petition, demanding Donnelly's firing and prosecution, surpassed 100,000 signatures. 3 days after the assault, Gavin walked into City Hall with a folder under his arm and steel in his spine. No press, no entourage, just him and the evidence he and Marcus had compiled. In the mayor's sterile conference room, surrounded by officials who expected him to be emotional and easy to dismiss, Gavin presented himself as something they hadn't anticipated. Prepared. "Mr. Monroe," Mayor Eileen Harper began carefully, "we want to express our deepest sympathy. Troubling is when the internet's down." Gavin interrupted, his voice flat and controlled. "What happened to my wife was a felony." He opened his folder and slid copies of Donnelly's disciplinary history across the table. 3 prior excessive force complaints, 2 involving black women, all dismissed without follow-up. The room fell silent as officials realized they weren't dealing with a grieving husband seeking comfort. They were facing a man who had done his homework and wouldn't be placated with empty promises. "You have 24 hours, Gavin said as he prepared to leave. "After that, I go public with everything. Full transparency, names included." Months later, the courtroom was packed for what had become more than just a criminal trial. It was a reckoning. Officer Rick Donnelly sat at the defendant's table in civilian clothes, his badge and authority stripped away. When the prosecution played the video for the jury, gasps filled the room despite most having seen it before. Something about watching It in that formal setting, under fluorescent lights with a court seal overhead, made the brutality hit harder. But no testimony moved the room like Celeste's. Walking slowly to the witness stand, she spoke with quiet strength about that ordinary afternoon that changed everything. "I was just walking home," she began. "I had some oranges in my bag. I was going to surprise my husband with dinner." Her voice remained steady as she recounted the encounter, the accusations, the violence. "He told me I was loitering, that I was causing trouble. I tried to tell him I was just going home. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist. I didn't do anything wrong." When she described the kick, her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "I thought I lost the baby right then and there. I thought that was it." The defense tried their familiar playbook, claiming the video didn't show full context, that Donnelly felt threatened, that Celeste was non-compliant. But this time the narrative didn't hold. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked directly at Donnelly before speaking. "Officer Donnelly, you violated the very oath meant to protect the people of this city. You did not make a split-second mistake. You made a series of choices. You chose aggression. You chose violence. You chose silence after the harm." The sentence was unprecedented. 5 years in prison, stripped of law enforcement certification, pension forfeited, no eligibility for parole. As they left the courthouse, Celeste stepped forward to address the media. "I didn't think I'd ever see this day. I didn't think people like me would ever get justice in rooms like this. But today we did. And I hope, God, I hope, it opens the door for the next person." The victory in court was just the beginning. Gavin and Celeste, along with Rosa and Marcus, established the Monroe Initiative for Police Accountability, a nonprofit providing legal assistance to families affected by police violence, creating community-led policy proposals, and offering trauma counseling to survivors. When their son was born healthy and strong, they named him Justice, not because of what they'd won, but because of what they refused to stop fighting for. The Monroe Initiative grew from a concept into a thriving community foundation. They helped pass legislation requiring body camera footage release, trained young leaders in civic engagement, and provided support to countless families seeking accountability. 1 year after that terrible day on 4th and Walnut, they held a block party, not just celebrating their son's first birthday, but everything that had grown from their pain. Neighbors brought food, musicians played under string lights, and city officials attended not for photo opportunities, but to genuinely participate in the community they served. "I've spent the last year learning that justice isn't a destination," Gavin told the gathering. "It's a practice, a decision, something you have to choose every day, especially when it would be easier not to." Years later, the Monroe Initiative continued expanding its reach. They helped exonerate wrongfully arrested individuals, supported maternal health programs, and trained dozens of community leaders. The Celeste Act became a model for police reform legislation across multiple states. Gavin never forgot why he started this work. When speaking at a law enforcement training conference, he told a room full of officers, "You don't have to be the enemy, but you do have to be honest about what's broken, about what's been allowed, about who pays the price when silence wins." One older officer stood afterward and said, "Mr. Monroe, I don't agree with everything, but I heard you, and I think that's where it starts." As Gavin and Celeste watched their son take his first steps toward a group of children playing in their yard, they knew something profound. They hadn't just survived the system, they had reshaped it. Somewhere, down the road, when someone else stands up, demands change, and refuses to be silent, they'll do it because someone before them made it possible. Someone kicked open the door. Someone named Celeste. Someone named Gavin. Someone named Justice. Because sometimes justice doesn't come when it should, and sometimes the people who suffer most are the ones who stay silent the longest. But this story reminds us that there comes a moment when silence becomes too heavy to carry. In that moment, we must choose between fear and legacy. What Gavin and Celeste showed us is that one voice, when spoken with love, courage, and conviction, can move mountains. They turned pain into purpose, stood tall not for the spotlight but for their child and every child after, to live in a world fairer than the one they inherited. Their story is a reminder that we're never too old to stand for what's right. And, more importantly, we're never too old to lead the next generation by example. In a world that often feels broken, they proved that ordinary people can create extraordinary change. One voice, one stand, one act of courage at a time.